Hey everybody, it's Dollipop. I am back with another installment of my monthly tutorial series. This month's tutorial is one that I have been asked for several times, and it is hair fades. Yes, finally a hair fade tutorial. So real quick before we get started, I'm not going to cover how I shade hair in this tutorial. However, if you are a patron of mine, the Patreon only image format tutorial includes how I go about shading hair. So there's a lot of different ways you can do hair fades, and there's even a lot of different ways that I have tried to do hair fades. So far, this technique is my favorite. So I've mentioned in the past that every time I color a new object or a new part of a character, I keep all the shading on one layer. However, I'm going to break my rule for this technique because the technique relies on separating your shading layers. So with that, to get your image ready for the fade, you're going to want your hair on specific layers. The first layer is going to be your base layer, which is the base hair color that you have. The second layer is going to be the first shading layer. The third layer is going to be the second shading layer, and the fourth layer is going to be the highlight layer, and so on and so forth. It doesn't really matter how many layers of shading you use, just make sure that each one, including highlights, is on a separate layer in order for this to work. So once your shading is all on its own separate layers, you're going to create a new layer above all of the shading and name it fade or something like that. Then you're going to select the contents of the base layer of the hair. In Photoshop, you can do that by either pressing Command or Control and clicking the little icon of the layer. What this does is it selects only the contents of the layer that you selected. You can also do this using layer masks, but I have always personally used the layer selection tool. I know if you know how to use masks, it can make things a lot faster and a lot easier, but for me, my workflow is just better when I use it this way, so that's why I don't use layer masks when I do selections. So once you've selected the contents of the hair layer, you're going to go to your fade layer and use the gradient tool, and using whatever color you want, you're either going to draw a gradient from the top to bottom or the bottom to top. This method is really cool because you can use whatever color you want, because it doesn't rely on like adjustment layers or anything like that. So as you can see, I picked a nice kind of dark purple for her. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make the fade look a little more believable. So take a paintbrush tool, either a soft brush or a hard brush, depending on what your style is. Zoom in, and on your fade layer, take the same color as you used for the gradient and start just drawing small little strands that stand out from the gradient. These look kind of weird right now because they're not shaded yet, but once we get further on, they'll look a lot better. So we're drawing these strands so the fade just looks a little more natural, so that you can see kind of it chunks in there and it's not just like a gradient, which kind of looks unrealistic. So now we're going to use the same principle, and we're going to take the eraser tool and we're going to erase some strands of the gradient. This does the same exact thing as drawing it does. It just creates a little bit more realistic of a fade because it brings some of the top color into the bottom. So you just want to kind of use it sparingly so it doesn't look too out there. And depending on your style, you can either do big chunks of eraser or little tiny lines of eraser. It just depends how you draw hair. I draw hair pretty chunky and I don't do a lot of individual strands, which is why I opted to just do a couple of strands for contrast with the eraser. So this is where the real fun begins. So you're going to do this entirely on your fade layer. The whole fade is one layer. So what you're going to do first is you're going to select the contents of your first shading layer. And if you recall, we do that by pressing Control and clicking on the layer icon. After you've selected the contents of that layer, you're going to pick a color that's a little darker than your fade color, which you would normally use to shade if you were just coloring the hair that color. Then you're going to fill the contents. And because we just selected the contents of the first shading layer, it fills just the shapes of the first shading layer. So as you can see, it kind of creates shading that is in the exact same place as where you already shaded. And by doing it this way, it means you don't have to worry about lining up the shading shapes and making them perfect. You just shade the original color the way you want it, and the rest just falls into place. So we're next going to kind of repeat the process. So you're going to stay on your fade layer, then you're going to select the contents of the second shading layer, pick an even darker color and fill. That way, again, it creates just the shapes of the second shading layer, which you can see why you want to do all of your different shading layers on different layers. And you can probably imagine how the rest of this tutorial is going to go. We select our highlight layer, pick a bright color and fill it, and then our second highlight layer, pick a bright color and fill it. And that's pretty much all there is to it. As you can tell, once you get the hang of it, it is a really simple technique for doing really nice hair fades. So there you have it. Hopefully now you'll be able to create a hair fade whenever you want to. I told you, it's so simple. The magic is probably totally gone now, but yeah, that's how I do it. This is about the third technique that I have figured out to do hair fades in, but like I said, by far my favorite. Thank you so much for watching, and I am so sorry that the landscapers at my apartment complex decided to start doing the landscaping right in the middle of my voiceover, so you probably will hear some leaf blowers in the background. I'm saving for a new microphone, I promise. It probably won't be a super fancy one, but you know. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you are interested in getting the image format tutorial and also the labeled PSD file for this drawing, definitely head over to my Patreon. Those two things are both available for the $5 or more tier. I have a bunch of other cool rewards on there too. I'm thinking of opening up a monthly sticker tier as well, so if you're into my art and would like to see more of it, I would love if you check out my Patreon. Other than that, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Have fun drawing and have an awesome day!